Okay, have you heard the one where I lived in the ghetto? And I don't know if you're supposed to say ghetto anymore, so I will just say a poor urban area occupied primarily by minority and or minorities. So, uh, little background. I was born and raised in Texas, and in Texas there is a location, it's like Fort Worth area, called Poly. And I don't know if you're aware of Poly. I'm sure it's not the same as it was in the 80s or like the late 70s, but that is where I grew up. So the background is I was born, my mother and my biological father, tried to make a go of it. Didn't work out as such. That's a story for another time. So I was raised by my grandparents, my mother's family. So I had my grandmother, who I called Mama, and I had my grandfather, who I called Big Papa. I know that sounds cool, but I was not cool. And he was fantastic. He was like, a hero for me. And then my grandmother was a little aggressive, I will say. I now think she probably had a lot of menopausal issues, but there was a lot of fighting in the house. So the neighborhood that we lived in, I believe from what I hear, they had this house. They had a little bit of land, I'd say a little under an acre. And everything, the problems kind of came around, or when they first bought the house, they were not there. And so when I came to live with them, I was a baby, I suppose. I was one, I don't even know. But I lived with my grandparents until I was about 8 years old. And the neighbors, so ooh, this was fun. So we had one neighbor to the right of us who was a big group of people, Spanish descent. I think they had lots of chickens, but there was probably, multiple people. Then we had the neighbor to the other side of us who was a creepy old man that always wanted me to come sit on his lap for candy. I don't think I ever did. If I did, I blocked it out. After that, it would be my aunt. So my mother's sister lived 2 doors down from my grandmother's house, and she was my escape. She had every animal there was known to man. She had rabbits and a goat, literally, instead of a mowing lawnmower, she had a goat that would eat things. We ended up eating that goat. I don't like to talk about it. I miss you, Baba. That's all I have to say. And then a neighbor to my Aunt Karla was my girlfriend and chum, Tanya. So Tanya and I would hang out very rarely. I think we started hanging out and something must have gone awry. I, was a child, but she was my black friend and I was her white friend, and we were so confused on why we had different colored skin. I remember being like, why is your skin so dark? And she's like, I don't know, I guess I go out in the sun more. And I think about that a lot because, the innocence of children, it was really kind of sweet. But I remember her family having a hard time with the father. And it's interesting to think back, spiritually speaking, there was a soul tie that during a lot of my healings that I had to remove from Tanya. There was a connection that we had, I think, through the traumatic living environments that we both had, that we bonded to each other, and we were trying to get something out of each other that was not capable of being, conveyed by a child. So Tanya and I were friends, but for the most part, I was on my own with my cat, my pet Merlin. So I was an outdoor cat as well. Both him and I would just wander the yard. And that's how I spent my childhood. And a lot of the childhood was me alone with my cat. Looking back, I know that I was not alone through this whole thing. I do feel, looking backwards, like really having that time with God, and that's where I was. I was with him. He was protecting me through this chaos. And the stories, oh my goodness. So I remember walking to my aunt's house 2 doors down, and they had a Doberman across the street. I got freaked out by this Doberman all the time. But this Doberman had gotten out on this particular day. I was walking to my aunt's, and the Doberman was in between me. It was in the path, and I was getting attacked. Out of nowhere, my aunt's dog jumps over the fence and saves me. So I think that's why I don't have a fear of dogs, because I've been attacked by dogs a number of times. But I was also saved by a dog, so I think that's just balances things out. I don't really know. Then I remember being asleep in the bed. I wouldn't sleep in my own room, so I was sleeping with my grandfather up in the bedrooms, and I think my grandmother slept on the couch. I don't know. I don't ask questions. So my grandmother comes running up, and she's like, "Get on the floor. Get on the floor." There was a drive-by, so I know that somebody was driving by shooting, and I had to get on the floor. And they explained it to me, and I don't know what part of me wasn't afraid. I just wasn't afraid. And I can't understand, like, looking back, I'm like, why wasn't I more freaked out by this? I think I was more concerned about the certs, like that was a candy from the 80s, like these mints my grandfather had, if I could maybe take one while I was on the floor and get away with it. Like, I was more worried about the candy than like bullets coming in. I understood, like I comprehended that there possibly could be a bullet at any moment coming through the window. It didn't freak me out. We had a lot of break-ins. We had a lot of things stolen. My favorite story was my grandparents had to work, so I was one of those latchkey kids. So if I wasn't going to daycare or summer camp or whatever, I was home alone with my great grandmother. My great grandmother had dementia or Alzheimer's. I don't know. I don't ask questions. And so she was watching me. I had to have been 6. I don't know. We were outside, and random passerbys, constant random passerbys. She has let this one in to use the bathroom. This young woman stole my retainer. So I thought that was hilarious. It didn't freak me out. I knew, like, my discernment knew that when this girl was coming in, I'm like, Nanny, that's what I called the great grandma. Nanny, this is a little, sus. And, but she did steal my retainer, and I guess I kind of liked that because then I didn't have to wear my retainer. But I did find it fascinating that that's what she decided to steal in the bathroom. So there was a lot of different characters around the neighborhood. I didn't go outside of my fence. I didn't go outside of my gate. I really stuck to my cat and nature. And I always felt loved. So as much as there was chaos around me, my grandmother was very bitchy and very angry and very controlling. And my grandfather pulled away from that and tried just to get out of any argument he could. And by me escaping under the table, all that chaos, I knew I was loved. I knew I was loved by my grandmother. I knew I was loved by my grandfather, my aunt down the street, my aunt in California. I knew my mom and my biological father, they loved me. They might not have been there, but I know they loved me. I know my stepdad loved me. I had a lot of people that loved me. And I think that's what kept me from freaking out on the floor when a bullet could be coming at me. The love. Yes, my grandmother had a strong sense of self that was maybe a little, but that confidence that she instilled in me, also helped me relax into the state that I never knew anything else. I never knew any difference, and I always knew I was loved. So living in the ghetto, I didn't recognize it as a bad thing.